most of you are familiar with the Trust. If you're not, I encourage you to check out our website and dig around, explore all of our different program areas, including habitat stewardship, bird conservation, watershed conservation, and our regenerative farm CSA program. We're a nonprofit land trust that does a lot more than just conserve land. And so with that, I will share my screen here and just jump right back into where we were last week. All right. So we left off we had just finished talking about molt in birds and how they need to change out their feathers to stay optimally functioning for their lives, including migration, nesting, all that good stuff. And so part of the avian life cycle, all birds do nesting, except for some cheaters, which we'll talk about later. But nesting is amazing phenomenon of the avian world, how they can build these incredible works of architecture with just a bill and 2 feet is really amazing. So here's pictured a chimney swift, and they build their nests just using sticks and their own saliva, which acts like super glue. To build this sort of cantilevered nest that's stuck right on into the inside of either a hollowed out tree, a dead tree called a snag, or more often in these structures that people build called chimney swift towers that simulate the inside of a chimney, since a lot of modern chimneys prevent chimney swifts from nesting. But it's amazing that, those babies are outgrowing that nest, it almost looks like, and that nest is still stuck to the wall and it's not going to fall. So really incredible. Passerines, that was a term we mentioned last week. This is the largest order of birds. It's the perching birds that we're familiar with. It includes songbirds. So songbirds are passerines, but not all passerines are songbirds. So passerines are altricial. And this term means they are they're born naked, young, and fairly helpless. So this is because they're very small, poorly provisioned eggs generally. And so the young take a while to develop. It's about 2 weeks generally. This is, a lot of time. And I mentioned last week, when I say a general rule of thumb for birds, there's always going to be outliers, but generally it's going to be 2 weeks between hatching and mobility, or when the bird fledges and leaves the nest, somewhere in that range for passerines. And there's varying degrees of that. And many times they leave the nest before they can actually fly, because you want to get the babies out of the nest as fast as possible, because it's a very vulnerable period. So there's a host of predators, including raccoons, skunks, snakes, even other birds like crows and jays, that will feast on not only the eggs, but also the young in the nest. The birds are charged with getting their young out of the nest as fast as they possibly can. Here's an eastern bluebird that's kind of on the lazy end of altricial birds. They take about 17 to 18 days for the young, once they hatch, to fledge and leave the nest. And one of the reasons for this is that they are cavity nesters. So they'll nest in bird boxes, which simulate cavities in trees where they would traditionally nest. And so because they have that protection of a cavity, they can really take their time developing, but they're not taking their time as much as you think. So when they leave, they really usually can't fly, a baby bluebird. It takes another week to get to that sustained flight after they leave. So varying degrees of altricialness, I'll call it. So we have the Carolina wren, which only takes 11 days from hatching to fledge. They're born a little bit less altricial. And the reason for this, a lot of it is always tied to the bird's life history. So Carolina wren is an open cup nester. They'll build their nest in, you've probably had them around your house building nests in hanging baskets, or the picture on the upper right is actually at Rushton Farm. They built their nest in a weed whacker. So very vulnerable, much more vulnerable than a cavity nester. And so they need to get their young out faster. And these birds can fly pretty well if you've ever seen Carolina wrens fledge. And then we've got the total other end of the spectrum of the passerines, the yellow-billed cuckoo, which is really, really strange bird. Some people call it the rain crow for its habit of calling on very hot summer days before a thunderstorm. They have among the shortest rate of development of any altricial species of birds. They incubate the egg for only 9 days, and generally, like bluebirds, it's 13, or it's like around 14 days. So yellow-billed cuckoo only incubates for 9 days, and then the chick fledges in only 7 days, which is pretty insane. This is what the weird little chick looks like. All his feathers coming in. He looks a little reptilian. You can really see his dinosaur lineage. And going back to the life history of this bird, so this is a bird that feeds on irregularly available food sources like tent caterpillars and other maybe even toxic caterpillars that other birds won't eat. And so they need to be able to move around pretty fast to follow this food source and be able to nest and get the fledglings, get the nestlings out of the nest as fast as possible so they can move on to the next food source. And then also, they have the largest egg size relative to female body size of all the altricial species, of most of the songbirds. So this is a picture of this is actually a decoy. But that's the exact size of a cuckoo egg compared to the small little speckled eggs are yellow warbler eggs. So you can see looks like an ostrich egg next to those. So the bigger the egg, the more well provisioned it is, and the faster the development can then be. That's what enables cuckoo to have its young fledge in only 7 days. The northern cardinal has among the longest post-fledging parental care of any songbird, almost 2 months it can be. So again, this is a species that is very vulnerable to predators. Sadly, only 15 to 30% of cardinal nests succeed in fledging young. So the cardinals will nest from March through September, just throw together these sloppy nests and get the young out as fast as they possibly can. So these guys fledge at around 9 days, and they can't even fly till day 20. And then you can see why the cardinal needs to take care of the fledgling for a while, even after it's left the nest, and even after it can fly. It still gives out subsidies to the young. Then we've got all kinds of crazy things. Hummingbirds. So ruby-throated hummingbirds, their young stay in the nest for a really long time, like 3 weeks. And that is because the hummingbird obviously is very tiny and it's aerially restricted, needs to be able to get around optimally all the time to feed itself and its fast metabolism. So the female can't carry a large egg. So it's teensy tiny, very altricial when it's born. So the first week in the nest, these very helpless young are covered with these yellow hairs that some theorize this is Batesian mimicry. It's trying to imitate this black flannel moth caterpillar on the left here. That's one of the toxic caterpillars in North America. And you can kind of see how the yellow looks like the hairs of the caterpillar. So it might help ward off some hungry predators in that first week to help it get through the 3 weeks in the nest. Then we have altricial birds and then precocial birds. And going back to the yolk size, the precocial birds are like the water birds and the game birds. They lay really big, well-provisioned eggs, and so the young hatch and they can fly and walk away. You know, when you see ducklings, they're immediately walking behind the parents. These are precocial birds. And then the cheater, the brown-headed cowbird. You don't want to be brown-headed cowbird. This is the brood parasite. They don't build nests at all. So she can lay like 30 some eggs each season because she's not expending any extra energy raising the young. She's leaving that up to other bird species. So on the left is a nest not built by a cowbird because they don't build nests. This is a chipping sparrow nest. And of course, you can pick out the brown-headed cowbird egg as being larger than the other two. Therefore, it's going to develop faster, probably outcompete, and lead to the deaths of the other two. And so the parent chipping sparrow would be taking care of just the cowbird. And this is a bird that used to only be restricted to grasslands of middle North America, but it expanded its range with human development and deforestation. And so they can actually wreak some havoc on woodland birds like wood thrush, where since more and more forested habitats are being fragmented, wood thrush are pushed into these smaller fragments that are easily parasitized. Their nests are easily parasitized by brown-headed cowbirds in these wooded fragments. And then while we're talking about villains, the other two big ones are the house sparrow and the European starling. These are both our non-native introduced species, sort of a misguided homage to William Shakespeare in the late 1800s. They're both introduced to New York City. And then they really, and by the early 1900s, they compete with our cavity nesting birds like bluebirds. So early 1900s, they were really wreaking havoc on those populations. So then mating systems. This can get, if this was ornithology advanced, you could spend like a whole class on bird mating systems. It gets complicated. But the only thing you guys need to remember is that monogamy is the exception rather than the rule in birds. So in this, actually really wasn't until the 60s that people realized that all birds weren't monogamous. They thought they largely were. But now they know even birds that form long-term bonds, pair bonds, like the common murre, they are pretty promiscuous still. But there is Wisdom, the Laysan albatross, that has been faithful to her mate since 2010. She just turned 70 years old. She is the oldest known bird. This is a long-lived species that lives on Midway National Wildlife Refuge in the North Pacific. And they mate for life, and they meet their mates at dance parties. So she met hers in 2010. And you can do the math on that. That's longer than a lot of marriages. And she's had 37, this year she laid her 37th egg. So really, really incredible, especially considering that Laysan albatross is a species that's affected by climate change, which is changing ocean currents and their prey availability. They're also affected by industrial fishing, like long line fishing. So pretty amazing. So ornithologists today are focusing on the full annual life cycle of birds, whereas they used to only focus on nesting and breeding and what they were doing in the summertime. Now we know it's a lot more complicated. Even the young, after they disperse, they require specific habitats. Like we're finding a lot of our interior forest nesting birds. The young don't stay in the forest. In their first fall, they may move to a more shrubby area that has more dense cover from predators, and is a little easier to get along in, and for a young bird who's just figuring out how to make it in the world. So all these different habitat requirements through their lives. During migration, they need stopover habitat to refuel, then wintering grounds and breeding grounds. So bird conservation gets pretty complicated. This is a great quote by Scott Weidensaul about bird migration. It's the world's only true unifying natural phenomenon, stitching the continents together in a way that even the great weather systems fail to do. And he has a new book out, if you want to learn more about bird migration, called On the Wing, Life on the Wing, coming out March 30th. For now, just spend a couple minutes on migration. Again, this is a topic you could stay on for a long time. So our neotropical migrants are birds of two worlds. They spend the summer in the tropics and then the summer in the temperate zones and winter in the tropics. And many of these birds fly by night. They do their migrations by night, like this picture of a black-throated blue warbler. And they travel by night because, one, the air is a little more stable, especially for these small birds, like a little warbler like this who's constantly pumping his wings. You want to travel at night when it's cooler and calmer so you don't overheat. And then also that it allows, traveling by night allows them to stop over by day and forage around in good habitat. There's also less predators at night. So why, you guys can just yell out if you have an answer. Why do birds migrate? Why, if you're in the tropics in the winter, why don't you just stay there since it's warm all year round? Why come back? Why come to the temperate zone to breed? Anybody have any ideas?
Competition?
Yeah, less competition.
Yep, that's one theory, that there's less competition. Yeah. So a young bird,
more food,
in the tropics might have to wait. What's
food.
that?
Food.
Yeah, yeah, food. Yeah, food availability is the big one. But
yeah.
What's that?
Well, days are longer here in the temperate zone, so they have more food. They have more time to feed.
Close. Any other ideas? Oops. So we said competition. We said food.
Yeah.
And then another one is predators. The theory is that the temperate zone has less predators like snakes than you find in the tropics. Oh. And then the food is the big one. So they come to the north for the North American protein pulse in the summer. So our soils are glacial fed, and then the freeze thaw cycle in the spring brings up all these nutrients from the bottoms of our stream beds and brings up nutrients. Insects emerge, and you've got this pulse of life in the North American, in the temperate zones, that the birds are taking advantage of to feed their young. They need protein. Most birds feed their young insects. Again, not all of them, but most of them. And so that's the main theory of why you would come north to the temperate to breed. So avian aerodynamics. So in migration, a larger bird is going to be able to travel a lot more. This is the bar-tailed godwit, and there was a recent article. This is wins the record for longest avian migration nonstop. So this is a bird that breeds in Alaska. It feeds on clams and worms for a couple months before heading out. And a bird was tracked with a satellite transmitter, and it was discovered this bird flew 7,500 miles from Alaska to New Zealand in 11 days nonstop. So that's pretty crazy. And it doubles its weight to do this. Now, a little tiny warbler like an American redstart would never be able to do this because of fuel loading. So a tinier bird can't store as much fat, and fat is fuel for these birds. So because that bar-tailed godwit probably packed on fat all over its entire body, that's how it was able to power such an incredible feat. So when we have a bird in the hand, like at bird banding, these are pictures. If you blow the feathers in the wishbone area or the what we call a furcular hollow, you'll see if they have fat. On the right, you'll see this orange glow, this subcutaneous fat. If they don't have fat, it's just this pink divot. And birds only store fat like that for overnight flights, for long extended flights like the godwit. He would have had fat all over his body. Thighs, furcular hollow, and everywhere else. So migration is quite an amazing feat. So birds function in the ecosystem. They're very important for all these reasons, which we'll get into. But essentially, if we didn't have birds, the whole balance would be thrown off. One, some of them, I should say, are keystone species. So these are like woodpeckers. They create holes which supply other species with homes. So over 40 North American bird species are what we call secondary cavity nesters. So they rely on woodpecker carpentry, like these little northern saw-whet owl chicks you see on the right, and then also like our eastern bluebird that we mentioned earlier. So the pileated woodpecker or other woodpeckers are keystone species. We need birds for dispersal and pollination. So a lot of oak and pine forests depend on regeneration from forgetful corvids. So they cache more than they can actually eat, or they forget where they hide their seeds, acorns and whatnot, and that's how forests can regenerate. This is actually a picture of a blue jay at somebody's feeder with peanuts. But it shows how they can really stuff their whole bill full of, they can store like 5 acorns just in their gular pouch. And then pollination, of course, the hummingbirds going from flower to flower. We need birds for pest control. Birds that eat insects, they help not only with agricultural pests, but the pests that could wreak havoc on our forests. Like the wood borers, leaf borers. A barn owl can eat 11,000 mice in its lifetime, which is estimated could consume 13 tons of crops. 11,000 mice. Just, I don't know if you can imagine 11,000 mice, but that's how many a barn owl eat in its life. So, they have a real effect on the ecosystem, and they help us out a lot. And then the vultures, they did a study and found that in Spain, vultures saved over €1 million in cattle carcass removal. So without vultures, we'd have a lot more wild and domestic carcasses and diseases, and it wouldn't be pretty. And then we've got indicator species like this beautiful Louisiana water thrush. This is a bird that feeds on macroinvertebrates, or the insects that live in the water. And they can only feed on the ones that they eat, things like mayflies that have to be in non-polluted water. So the presence of a Louisiana water thrush in a streamway means that you have a healthy, non-polluted stream. And the absence means maybe something happened and your stream is no longer healthy. So a lot of birds are like this. If they're not doing well, then other animals in that habitat aren't doing well. And guess what? Birds aren't doing well. So neither are we. 1/3 of all North American bird species are in urgent need of conservation action. And here's just a little graphic that shows some of the major causes of bird mortality. At the top, we see habitat loss being the greatest cause. Cats kill an estimated 2.4 billion birds in the US each year alone. And of course, chemicals, collisions, and then this, of course, doesn't even mention climate change, which we'll talk about. But so maybe some of you all heard Journal of Science, I guess it's a couple years ago now. This study came out that we've lost a third of our birds, something like 2.9 billion in just a single lifetime in 50 years since 1970. So this is 1 in 4 birds gone. And many of them are common birds. And that means that our ecosystems are losing their ability to support even basic bird life. Migratory birds. And these are all from Cornell Lab of Ornithology. I don't take credit for any of these amazing infographics. And while I'm on that topic, many of these photos too. I scavenged the internet to tell the stories. I don't take credit for the pictures. So 2 in 5 Baltimore Orioles are lost since 1970. Grassland birds have been really heavily hit due to agricultural intensification, which we'll get into a little bit later. 3 in 4 eastern meadowlarks are gone since 1970. Aerial insectivores have also been heavily hit due to pesticides and also climate change. So some solutions. I skipped that previous boring slide because we're gonna get to all of it. I always like to start with backyard habitat. This is something we can all do. So 95% of pristine places in the US are gone. And there's 48 million acres of lawn. And maybe 50 years ago, it was okay to make our lawns look like this. But now we need all the space, all of the conservation space that we can get. And conservation can happen on these 48 million acres of lawn. I always love this infographic. Are you still dressed like this? Then why does your lawn look like this? These 18th century style lawns, they don't help anything. We need to start looking at our yards as through the lens of ecological function rather than traditional aesthetics, and thinking about the millions of interactions that occur in nature and supporting those. And it starts with the insects. So in the first class, we talked about the evolution of modern birds from dinosaurs taking millions of years. Well, it's the same thing with insects. Insects support the food web, and they've evolved over millions of years to specialize on using certain plants. Plants don't want to be eaten. For example, the milkweed shown here is toxic. So plants or animals, insects like this longhorn beetle that eat it, need to be able to develop ways around those toxins. And so you get these plant insect specializations. And so that's why when you go to a garden center and buy crepe myrtle or some other ornamental plant that's not native to our region, it won't be supporting the food web. And of course, insects need our help as well as birds, and they're intricately tied, of course. The German scientists found that from the years of like 1989 to 2016, there's a 76% decline in insect biomass. If we lose insects, we lose all of these insect roles: decomposing, pollination, pest control, and wildlife nutrition. So bird food is what we're interested in. So remember in the first class, I talked about carotenoids coming from plants. Well, if you eat caterpillars that eat plants, you get the carotenoids. Many of our breeding birds, as I mentioned before, feed their young caterpillars because it's insect protein and it's carotenoids. And those are full of plumage support, remember we talked about, and then also antioxidants. So they really hone in on the caterpillars, which are host plant specialists. And so they're mostly going to be found on native plants. And Doug Tallamy, author of Bringing Nature Home, did studies on chickadees in a suburban environment and found that in a suburban neighborhood with mostly non-native plants, the chickadees had trouble. They had to travel farther to find the caterpillars. They need about 500 to 600 caterpillars every day to feed their young. And so it gets challenging for them. They don't fledge as many young, or the young fledge later. And this has effects on their population. So more caterpillars equals more birds. So focus on the caterpillars in your yard and the plants that support them. There's some keystone plant species. So 5% of our native plants support over 75% of the caterpillar biomass that drives the food web. Here's some examples like oaks, cherries, willows. Flowers include asters, sunflowers, goldenrod. These are big bangs for your buck. This is where many of the caterpillars are found. And in Chester County alone, 511 species of moths and butterflies rear their young on oak, whereas on like a non-native ginkgo, only 2 species are found there, 2 species of caterpillars. So big difference, big effect, native versus non-native. Other things you can do in your yard, leaving snags or dead trees, even just not mowing is an excellent way to promote biodiversity. Keeping cats indoors, which we mentioned, are pretty detrimental. If you can't keep them indoors, you can get a wildlife collar for them. So bells don't work, they found, but these wildlife collars, which I think you can just order off of Amazon, are somewhat effective in warning birds against them. You can become a bird watcher and submit your sightings to eBird. It's one of the world's largest wildlife databases.
By joining eBird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
Whoops, that was the end. Here's it from the beginning.
Every day, millions of people around the world enjoy watching birds and recording their sightings.
What if there were a way to take all of these observations, yours, ours, everyone's, and put them all in one place?
If we could do this, we would fundamentally transform not just birding, but science and conservation.
From this idea emerged eBird. Put simply, eBird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, their photos, their sound recordings, and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's incredibly powerful. All you do is let us know where you went birding, when, how far you traveled, and what you saw. It's powerful because hundreds of thousands of people all around the world are doing it, and it's growing. eBird already safeguards 500 million sightings, information that allows all of us to understand the movements and needs of birds at global scales. eBird maintains your lists for you and shares them with other birders from around the world. By sharing, it's now possible for anyone, anywhere, to find your target birds and the best birding hotspots any time of the year. Before eBird, there was no way to comprehensively understand population-level movements of many species. By combining your sightings with remote-sensed habitat data from NASA, we're able to generate species distribution models that provide an unparalleled view of where and when birds are in the landscape. Scientists and students all over the world are now able to use eBird datasets for their research at a variety of spatial scales. These observations help inform better conservation strategies, opening the door to the future of bird conservation. And this is just the beginning. With the help of millions of people who come to eBird each year, we are creating a free, open access system that is easy to use, fun, and rewarding. Rewarding for birders, for scientists, for conservationists, and ultimately the birds themselves. Go to eBird.org or download eBird Mobile to get started, all for free. By joining eBird, you're joining a global team of people that share your passion for birds. Be a part of it.
All right, so eBird is, as you could see, is a pretty amazing citizen science effort. And it was actually, they used some of that data to inform the research that came out about that worrying decline in birds, that we've lost 2.9 billion in the past 50 years. eBird was used for that partially, and eBird's been used in an excellent example of dynamic conservation is the Nature Conservancy. Has started paying rice farmers in California's Central Valley to keep their rice fields flooded post-harvest for a longer period of time when these shorebirds are migrating through. So they used eBird also combined with NASA satellite imagery to figure out where these birds were during migration, and to implement this program. And then they also used eBird to monitor its success. And they found through citizens' reportings that the density and diversity of shorebirds in these flooded farm fields had increased significantly. So a lot of uses for eBird. Regenerative agriculture, supporting, this is farming of old. This is how Thomas Jefferson would have done it before all the chemicals got introduced. This is a picture of Rushton Farm, and we banded over 100 species of birds here, and they grow a huge variety of vegetables on the very small piece of land. It's farming in concert with nature, keeping soil healthy, keeping habitat for birds as well as pollinators, and keeping chemicals out of the system. And this is really the way to feed the growing population today. You might think with the world population at 7.6 billion, this is kind of kitschy how that's going to be good for more than just the birds. But here's the story in a nutshell. Conventional agriculture tills the soil, which weakens it and requires all these chemical inputs like glyphosate, which actually originated came from World War II. It was these are chemicals that came from chemical warfare agents, and then were introduced into our food systems in the 70s. Glyphosate has been linked to cancer and all this terrible stuff. It's an herbicide, but it also kills the microorganisms in the soil. It also affects birds. Neonicotinoid is a common chemical that they use in agriculture as well. This is a pesticide, and that's been found. I'll mention Motus a bit later, but they found that seeds coated in this pesticide, if a bird like a sparrow is stopping over in a farm field and eating some of these seeds that are coated in this chemical, it imitates nicotine in their system, and it causes anorexia. And so it actually caused delays in migration of 3 days, which could have significant effects on their survivorship and breeding. So chemicals are obviously not great for birds, and they're not great for soil health. Most conventional agriculture, a handful of soil is completely devoid of microorganisms when it's really supposed to contain more microorganisms than people that have ever lived. Soil is supposed to be alive, and we've lost, you said, a third of the topsoil since the 70s has been lost due to all this heavy tilling and chemicals. So all over the world, this desertification is occurring. So when you till the soil and destroy it with chemicals, it releases water and it releases carbon dioxide. and it results in desertification. And over 40 million people worldwide are pushed off their land due to this phenomenon of not taking care of the soils. And 10 million hectares of cropland are abandoned worldwide every year due to this not taking care of the soils. And where do people have to go to get more farmland? You clear more forests. So this is, of course, directly affects birds because you're clearing their habitat, and indirectly affects them through increasing climate change. So 60% of the world's deforestation is occurring because of this grab for cropland. So healthy soil is really going to be the cornerstone of life. That's the answer. Soil can actually sequester more carbon than the atmosphere and all the plants living on it combined. So if we take care of it and steer away from synthetic chemicals and GMOs and pesticides, taking care of the soil, and you're also mitigating climate change in an extremely effective way. So regenerative agriculture is the best way to do that. You're focusing on the soil, you've got cover crops contributing to the biology of the soil. You're not tilling, and so the soils can hold more water, grow more plants. You've got enhanced biodiversity, therefore, and not even just in your crops, but in surrounding habitats. You're increasing resiliency. This is a picture of Rushton Farm in the fall. So you've got the peripheral habitat like milkweed that had always been there in the past, and you're supporting all these pollinators. They've found there's a 10-fold decrease in crop pests in regenerative agriculture versus conventional, which represents a huge cost benefit. So farmers can actually increase their profits with regenerative farming. So that can help birds, as we said, directly by providing habitat, and indirectly by mitigating climate change. And similarly, if you eat meat, if you choose pasture raised and grass fed, you'll also be supporting bird habitat. Obviously, when you do this, what we call regenerative ranching, rotational grazing, cows on grassland like that, you're supporting grassland bird habitat, and you're also mitigating climate change, because it's natural for herbivores, large herbivores, to roam around the land. But 70% of cropland in the US is used, unfortunately, to make corn and hay and soybeans, just to feed animals that are in these feedlots, which obviously there's no habitat there, and you're contributing to emissions in an area like that. So some choices you can make there as a consumer for birds. And then it translates to farms in the tropics. So you can drink bird-friendly coffee. So this is a picture of sun coffee, which again, the same theme in the 70s. We've transitioned to sun coffees in the past 30 so years. Over half of the shade coffee farms have transitioned to sun coffee. And here again, eventually, with all of the inputs, chemicals and erosion, you'll get desertification. So this isn't really sustainable. And shade grown coffee is going to support a very diverse habitat. And incidentally, coffee is a shrub that grows naturally in the shade of a rainforest. So you're going to be supporting bird habitat for our neotropical migrants, as well as a healthier system that prevents climate change. So the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center did a study and found that, so here's the difference. There you got the sun-grown coffee, partial shade, and then the bird-friendly shade-grown coffee is this really functional ecosystem that supports 240 bird species, 3 times as many as sun coffee. So you can help birds even with your cup of coffee in the morning. Many birds, like our Baltimore oriole, overwinter in shade-grown coffee plantations. We have that really beautiful, clear, flute-like song. Whoops. And so you can, there's all different, there's birds and beans coffee, which you can buy online. You can visit the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center's website. We have a local coffee roaster right in Westchester called Golden Valley Coffee Roasters that also sells, not all of their coffee is shade grown, but a couple of them are. And so if you look for the Smithsonian these are different labels to look for, but this one's the best, the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, because they actually send people down to the farms to make sure that the farmer is doing it in a regenerative, bird-friendly way. You can also even order one on Amazon. I found a great one. It's called Tomorrow's Coffee. It tastes excellent. You can click a button on Amazon. It's here the next day. And they use bird-friendly techniques. Lights Out Philly, you might have heard Philly has just joined the Lights Out program with 33 other cities that started in Chicago in 1999. So starting April 1, some of the big atriums like the Comcast Center and Mellon Tower, they're going to turn out their lights from midnight till 6 a.m. starting April 1st through the spring migration. This Philly is along the Atlantic Flyway, and tens of millions of birds pass through. And as we said, they fly at night. And so oftentimes they're disoriented by the light, and they'll either hit the buildings or they'll spend a lot of energy confused. And then that can lead to lower survivorship on the rest of their migratory journey. So that's it's not perfect. Obviously, birds do fly before midnight, but midnight to 6 a.m. Should prevent a lot of these unnecessary bird deaths. At home, if you have birds hitting your window, you can, there's a host of different solutions, but a great one is these Acopian bird savers. I think it's acopianbirdsaver.com. It's American Bird Conservancy approved. They're just these vertical lines that are easy to install. This is called the Zen curtain. So one of the things we're doing to help birds is bird banding. So we follow a basic conservation formula. To save and conserve a species, you need to know how many there are, where the species is, and what it needs to survive. And banding essentially is answering some of those questions. We've been banding birds since 2010 at Rushton Woods Preserve. We use these mist nets that are nylon. We set them up early morning, dawn, check them every 30 minutes so that no bird is hanging in there exposed for too long. We're all trained in how to extract them and put a little metal band on them from the USGS, US Geologic Survey. And it has a unique 9-digit number on it. And all of the information and the data that we get from that bird is stored in the Bird Banding Lab database. So it's publicly accessible. Since the bird banding, this traditional bird banding has been around since the 60s, and we've gleaned something like, I think now it's like 70 million data hits. So a lot of good information comes from bird banding stations all over the country and the world. This is a top-down view of Rushton Woods Preserve, which is an important bird area, and then of course also the site of our regenerative farm. I think I mentioned before, we banded 15,000 birds total since 2010 of 100 species, which is a testament to the health of this system, including the farm. We've got some Pennsylvania state responsibility species, and these are species that play a role in securing the bird's global security by hosting 10% of its North American population. So this includes wood thrush, worm-eating warbler, scarlet tanager, species like we mentioned, the Baltimore oriole, that loves edges that regenerative farms create, and then they go and seek the same habitat in the tropics on shade-grown coffee farms. We have a lot of special birds, grassland birds that are declining, like field sparrows, yellow-breasted chat. We've set aside some shrub habitat for this shrub-loving species. So we band at Rushton to learn about all the species diversity that we have, to get land management feedback. Like, for example, we didn't always have that shrub area where we found the chat, but once we encouraged the shrubs and found the chat, that's a direct, immediately, well, that's, great habitat for shrubland birds. So that was great management feedback. We also learn about longevity and bird populations, and it's also a chance for us to connect people to the birds in their backyard that they wouldn't normally see. So stopover ecology, this is understanding when we recapture birds. So we capture a bird, put a band on it, and then that bird's sticking around, refueling at that habitat, and we capture it again, say a week later, and we can see how much weight it's gained. Sometimes birds will stick around for quite a while. So a veery was banded a couple of years ago. Took all data for it. 8 days later, we caught that same veery, and it had gained 47% of its body weight, which is pretty significant. And that bird with that fuel load could easily have traveled 200 miles that night. Veery is a pretty athletic thrush. They can even do transoceanic flights. We've learned some really cool longevity information. These are our 2 records. So this Institute for Bird Population did these little infographics about our famous old birds. So last summer, we banded an oven bird, or didn't ban it, we caught an oven bird that was already banded by us in 2011. And in 2011, it was 2 years old, which made it 11 years old. So that's pretty amazing. This is a neotropical migrant. And it's tied for the Bird Banding Lab's oldest oven bird on record. And then we had a veery, the same story, an 11-year-old veery, which is almost the record. Record for oldest veery is 13. So it's close, but some really old birds, which is amazing. And then last but not least, we've really dug into MODIS, which is this is revolutionizing wildlife tracking. It's radio telemetry, essentially, automated radio telemetry, where you stick up these towers and you stick a tag radio transmitter on the back of a bird, bat, or even insect. And then all it has to do is travel by the tower, and the tower is like a banding station, and you don't have to recapture the bird to get its location data. So this is really helping us to understand where birds are all the time. We're spying on birds really efficiently now. So MODIS is a worldwide effort. There's over 350 receiving stations. 10,000 animals have been tagged. All researchers can use the infrastructure. There's been over 500 million detections since like 2013. And then remember, traditional bird banding, there's been like 70 million since 1960. So you can see how much more significantly important MODIS is. Traditional banding will always still be important for population information, but MODIS is really important for understanding migratory connectivity and where these birds are going throughout their whole life cycle. And it's public data with public results. And so we are now running with various partners, including Powder Mill Avian Research Center, Bird Studies Canada, Ned Smith Center for Nature and Art. The Willistown Conservation Trust now runs the world's second largest MODIS operation. Started in 2017, really as Lisa Kijik's brainchild. It started with just 20 towers, making a fence across Pennsylvania so that any bird flying down the Atlantic flyway, any tagged bird will be picked up. So then since 2017, now it's burgeoned to 100. We have 100 towers from Maine to Maryland. So with all that infrastructure, you can really support a lot of ground roots research into bird movements across the landscape. And we've got, I think, 11 million detections since 2017 of 85 different species. We're learning things like shorebirds, like 300 red knots have flown over Pennsylvania. So the airspace above Pennsylvania may be just as important as like the Delaware Bay for shorebirds. And then again, that migratory connectivity. So one of the best records is a notable record was a gray cheek thrush that left Colombia, which is a very important staging area for many birds in South America. It showed up, it had a nano tag, and it showed up in Indiana some 3 days later. So it had flown 2,000 miles nonstop. So all kinds of information we're learning. Still so much more to learn. And I love this quote to end with. If you take care of birds, you take care of most of the big problems in the world. Thomas Lovejoy said that. All right, we got through it all. Your Ornithology 101 Blitz. Does anybody have any questions? We covered a lot of ground. If you don't have questions, I'm gonna go to show you eBird. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
You said that the new book by Scott, Wyden Saul, is Life on the Wind. But his previous book.
It's a world on the wing.
Oh, okay, because the previous book was Living on the Wind. So.
Yeah, I mixed them both up in my head, and then I said whatever I said, but it's called A World on the Wing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can see mine, I don't know if you can see me or not. I have it up.
Oh,
I don't know.
Yeah, I do see you.
See it? Yep.
I see
It's on back order right now. He's got an event at the Smithsonian on March 30th. If you look up the Smithsonian, it's called Smithsonian Associates.
Okay.
And he has a book release at for them. That's when he's officially releasing the book, March 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question. This is Keith. Hi. I remember when the ridiculous bells came out for cats that were supposed to warn birds, and it didn't apparently dawn on anybody that a ringing bell was not a signal to a bird. So how are the new things, the wildlife collars, supposed to work? Is there any better science behind them?
I think it's visually alerting to the birds. That's all I can figure. I don't know how much research has been done around the effectiveness of it, but I know it's more effective, obviously, than the bell. I mean, the most effective thing of all is leaving your cat inside. But if you have that neighbor that you're trying to find a middle ground with, then stick a wildlife collar in their yard, in their mailbox or something.
All right, thanks.
Blake, what shrubs did you plant at the trust?
Oh, right. So if I'm gonna send all of the participants some follow-up links and information, and we have a great page on our website that we put together of all kinds of information, including websites and places to find native plants, and I'll send all that to you. Yeah, so I'll make sure you guys get all that because that's another topic that I could have spent a whole session on, but
And we do have a native plants talk coming up on April 8th, a shameless plug here to tune into that, and we'll go over, some of those great native plants to support the birds and bugs.
Yeah, great question. All right, I'm gonna go to eBird then and do a final little quiz here for anyone that wants to stay on. I know it's 8, but if you want to stay on a few more minutes. This is a feature of eBird I just discovered. So I guess you guys can see my page, my website here. Can you? Hope you see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you go to eBird. This is where you would, log in, submit your data. Go to the Explore section, and there's all kinds of really neat features. Bar charts, you can enter in the hotspot or a place that you're going birding or walking, and you can see what birds you can expect to see throughout the year. You can find hotspots. And there's a photo and sound quiz they started. So here you can go in here, say start quiz, and you just put in. So say you're gonna go to Rushton Woods Preserve and Farm. It's 911 Delchester Road. I already put that in. I'm gonna go on April 22nd. I'm gonna check out the migratory birds there. So you can either pick photos or sounds. So I'll do photos first and then start quiz. You can kind of quiz yourself before you go. So it's another learning tool. Cornell Lab of Ornithology, abounds in learning tools here. So all these pictures were submitted by various eBirders, and that's how they're using it. So what bird is this?
Chipping sparrow. No?
Lapland longspur, snow bunting, Bachman sparrow, grasshopper sparrow, or none of the above?
None of the above.
So you think it's a chipping, so none.
Chipping
All right, yep,
sparrow.
you got it. Chipping sparrow.
Yeah.
Well done, Catherine.
Good.
All right, so then you just
We
have
know
to
you.
you have to rate the image to continue. Okay, what bird is this? So
It's
this
Boo.
what's that?
European starling.
You got it.
It's Boo.
All right, here's a tougher one.
Yeah.
Ooh, Phoebe?
Which one?
Phoebe.
The Phoebe.
Phoebe.
Is it an Eastern Phoebe or a says Phoebe?
Oh,
No,
that
not a says Phoebe. That's
Not
West.
says.
What's that?
I
So
don't
we're
think
saying
it's a
Eastern
says.
Phoebe?
Phoebe. It's Eastern
All
Phoebe.
right, Eastern Phoebe. Yep.
Yep.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
you woke us all up, Blake.
What?
You woke us all up.
Yes.
We're competing now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did a bird Jeopardy and we said all of our flappy hours and virtual events should just be Jeopardy from now on. People loved it. All right, what bird is this?
None of the above.
Oh,
Orchard Oriole,
Orchard
Bullock's Oriole,
Oriole.
Baltimore Oriole, or none of the above?
None of the above.
We're saying none of the above. All right. It was a Baltimore
Baltimore
Oriole.
Oriole.
It's a Baltimore Oriole. Oh,
that's
my.
a
the
female
girl.
Baltimore.
Yeah,
It's
a little
Mrs.
female.
Baltimore.
Yeah, it was Baltimore.
Because what? It's immature or because it's a female?
Female.
I think it's a
No. Okay.
It might be both. It might be an immature female.
Okay.
Oh, right. You're still doing a date too, right? It's
Oh,
April.
for heaven's sakes.
Mid-April.
What bird's this?
Cormorant.
That's a DC.
It's a Canada goose.
Double-crested
About
cormorant.
crested.
Yep.
And this is at Rushton?
No.
Well, that must
You
have
said they
been.
were at Rushton.
Yeah, well, it was. So that was probably like a flyover. If somebody
My
reported
gosh.
a checklist as a flyover. That picture wasn't necessarily from Rushton, but the actual birds were.
No.
The
So
person.
let's do sound now. So you can pick sound. I'll start the quiz. We do the same place, same time. Oh.
Water.
It's water. Yeah.
Couldn't hear anything.
No, only water.
I don't know. This one's terrible. Which one should we? Which one should we put? I'm gonna say none of the above.
Ebert, I put in for real now.
It was none of
Gonna
you.
rate that as low. That was terrible.
Inverse back. Okay.
Any ideas?
Red-tailed hawk.
It's a red tail.
Yeah, you got it. So we're looking at, we talked in the first class, spectrogram. So you're seeing the sound frequency over time with the intensity of the line showing the intensity of the sound. So yeah, that was red-tailed hawk. Now we're getting into the warblers.
Oh,
Anybody have any ideas?
I didn't hear it.
Yeah, us old people can't hear it.
yes.
Like I have to go, but thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Play it again.
All right.
Didn't hear a thing.
Can't hear a thing.
That's tough. I don't know. I'm gonna guess.
Young people can hear it either.
Yeah.
From the image, we ought to be able to guess.
It was
Theoretically.
Nashville. Nashville. All right. Well, so as you can see, there's all kinds of stuff to explore on eBird.
Yep.
And help you learn.
I have a bug question.
Yep.
Will the birds eat the cicada bugs that they say are coming, the 17-year-old ones?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
I
mean,
read
it's supposed to be quite an invasion.
The bigger birds like woodpeckers and those guys.
And does anything eat the lanternfly at all?
Well, I think some of our birds have been reported like this. I've seen a cardinal trying to eat them, and I think somebody said that the catbirds will. I don't think
good. We got a lot of catbirds.
With that.
But since they're not native, maybe if the bird is a generalist, but they're not native bugs, so.
Yeah, it would just have to be a naturalist or a generalist just taking advantage of. But it have to be pretty brave because the lanternflies are warning colors.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're actually toxic, but they appear to be.
I have to go.
Turning bird.
I have to go. Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye, Catherine.
Bye, Catherine.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Oh, and then so our bird banding opens on on April 22nd. We invite all of you guys to come out to bird banding. Every Thursday will be public through May 20th. So we're out there like 6:30ish in the morning to 10:30ish, and you'll want to just go on our website to register ahead of time. And then of course, if it's raining, we won't be out there because for the safety of the birds.
That's a pretty bird.
That was the black-throated blue warbler. And then, of course, these are our upcoming. Lindsay mentioned a native plant talk, April 8th. We have April 15th, a National Geographic Explorer, Alize Carrere, is presenting. So that'll be very exciting.
I have a question for Lisa. You mentioned that you could put in an order for the coffee.
Well, you could email me.
And it'll just be in the kitchen, or?
Yeah, I can do that if you want. If you send me an email, I'll be sure to get you some coffee. Okay. And we can make an arrangement. We can
make an arrangement.
Yeah, whatever's easy. I can even drop it off at your house. I don't care. I'll put it in the doggy birdhouse, the dog treat birdhouse.
Good. No, it's gone.
Oh yeah, we heard of that.
We had to
We
move
gave up
it.
on him.
Oh, too bad.
It's gonna have birds in it instead.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, we're trying to, if anyone wants to volunteer, we're trying to figure out a way to sell that bird-friendly coffee and promote it better, as you know, from the bird committee.
Right.
That's the challenge with bird-friendly coffee, is getting coffee available to people in an easy way, because the major stores don't seem to sell it. So that's our challenge, trying to make scientists into salespeople.
So if someone can figure it out,
Yeah.
tell Lisa.
Yeah, tell me. Yeah, the thing is, even with the online, the shipping charges are very expensive. So that's a limiting factor. It's just been hard to figure that one out.
So is this from the stash that's at the trust?
Yeah, we order it regularly, and then have it stashed there for, Susie sometimes gives it to different, so there's just different uses for it. But we do sell it if anyone is interested.
Another thing that you can do is write to Starbucks and say, for God's sakes, get your act together.
That's right.
I mean,
That's
if
right,
everybody did it, all the people
Yeah.
across the country.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Think of the marketing of the power of the marketing. If they did a really cool bird label, I mean, people they're label shoppers, a lot of them, or make a neat name. I mean, there's so much opportunity for someone who's good at marketing.
But I mean, it sounds dumb, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people on this that I'm seeing right now. And some people who are blacked out. If we had 15 people writing, from this part of the world, they pay attention. They really do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that might be something we should promote, to our members, to say, some ad. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I have, I think I've seen bird-friendly coffee at Kimberton Whole Foods.
Yes, yes.
So I do want to mention that they carry it. And I also want to mention that the month of April, they're doing a rounding up the register. So all of, if you round up your tab there, the donations go to the trust. And they did that for us in November, and I think they donated about $2,800 to the trust. So it's worth it. All those extra pennies add up. So shop at Kimberton.
The Willistown Conservation Trust Charity Month made more than any other charity they had.
Yeah.
For the Roundup campaign. For all the stores, all the Kimberton stores. So let's win again. Let's win again.
Buy lots of bird-friendly coffee.
Lots of us shopping there. It's good.
Stock up.
Yeah. And I would highly suggest, if you're looking for a good documentary to watch, it's not specifically about bird conservation, but Kiss the Ground is really fantastic. More about regenerative farming and how it can reverse.
Where's that available?
It's on Netflix. A
Okay.
lot of the facts I was spewing out in the regenerative farm section were actually gleaned from that.
And keep an eye out. We're gonna have the farm team coming up and talk about that a little bit, hopefully next month. So keep an eye on our calendar. There's more opportunities with that great film coming up.
Is it Kiss the Ground or Hit the Ground?
Kiss the Ground.
Kiss the Ground.
Yep, it's on Netflix. It's only an hour and 24 minutes. Every human should watch it. Well, thank you all so much, and I hope that I see you all out at banding this spring.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you, Blake. Great.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Blake.
Night.
Good night.
Thank you. Terrific.